Montana Territory, 1878. The widow's shack stood at the edge of Copper Creek like a scar on the landscape, half hidden by scrub brush and shame. Beatrice Gardner, 23 years old with hair the color of wheat fields in August, watched the town from her window each morning, knowing no one looked back. 6 months had passed since cholera took Henry Gardner, leaving her with nothing but debts, whispers, and the crushing knowledge that survival on the frontier meant hardening your heart until nothing could crack it open again. She pressed her palm against the warped wood frame, her plain gray dress hanging loose on a frame that had grown too thin. The women in town called her careless for letting her husband die, as if love could have stopped disease. The men looked through her like window glass, a used-up woman with no prospects and a reputation for bad luck. Beatrice had learned the truth the hard way. The frontier was no place for softness, for hope, for the foolish belief that anyone would reach for you when you fell. Better to expect nothing, safer to need no one. She told herself she wanted only to pay off Henry's debts to the general store, to survive each winter, to disappear into the background of Copper Creek until she became part of the landscape itself. What she could not admit, even in the dark privacy of her thoughts, was the hollow ache that grew wider each day, the desperate longing to matter to someone, to be seen as more than a cautionary tale whispered over quilting circles. The knock at her door that September afternoon shattered 6 months of silence. Beatrice nearly dropped the mending in her lap. No one came to her door, no one had crossed her threshold since the day they carried Henry out in a pine box. She stood slowly, heart hammering against her ribs, and opened the door to find a young cowboy standing in the dusty yard, hat in his hands, looking as uncertain as a colt on new legs. He could not have been more than 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. Clean-shaven except for a shadow of stubble, lean and sun-bronzed, he wore the dust of long travel on his boots and belt. The late afternoon sun caught the silver conchos on his vest, making him look almost like an apparition, too vital and alive to be real. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough from trail dust but gentle in a way that made something long dormant stir in her chest. "I am looking for work. Heard in town you might have need of help with repairs before winter sets in." Beatrice stared at him, uncomprehending. "Who told you that?" "No one specific, ma'am. I asked at the general store about who might need a hand, and the shopkeeper mentioned you had a property that could use attention. Name's Mason Riley. I am good with my hands, honest work for honest pay." The shopkeeper. Samuel Peterson, who held Henry's debts over her head like a noose. This had to be some kind of trap, some new humiliation she had not yet imagined. Beatrice felt her spine straighten, her voice cooling to match the ice that protected her heart. "I cannot pay you." "Did not ask for money, ma'am, asking for meals and a place to sleep in your barn while I work. 3 weeks of labor, then I will move on. I have my own reasons for staying quiet and out of sight for a spell." Something flickered across his face then, a shadow that spoke of running, of secrets, of a past that chased him like wolves. Every instinct told Beatrice to slam the door, to protect herself from whatever complication this man represented. But she looked past him to her sagging fence, her roof with its missing shingles, the whole slow collapse of her life made visible in rotting wood and rusted nails. Winter was coming, she would not survive another season like the last. 3 weeks, she heard herself say, then you move on. Mason Riley's face broke into a smile that transformed him from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip dangerously. "Yes, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, you will not regret this." But Beatrice already regretted it, because she recognized the stirring in her chest for what it was. Hope, that poisonous thing she had sworn to bury alongside her husband. She regretted it even more that evening when Mason sat at her table for supper, his presence filling her small cabin like light flooding a long dark room. He ate the simple beans and cornbread she offered with genuine appreciation, asking nothing, expecting nothing, but somehow making her aware of every movement she made, every breath she took. "Where are you from?" she asked, needing words to fill the dangerous silence. "Texas, originally. Been working cattle drives north, different ranches, saving money for my own place someday." He met her eyes across the table. "And you, Mrs. Gardner, are you from Montana Territory?" "Miss Gardner now," she said quietly, then wished she had not corrected him. "Or just Beatrice, I am from Kansas. My husband brought me here 3 years ago, convinced there was opportunity in Copper Creek." She heard the bitterness in her own voice. He was wrong. "I am sorry for your loss." Everyone said that, no one meant it. But something in Mason's voice made her look up, and she found him watching her with such unguarded compassion that she had to look away before it undid her completely. "It was 6 months ago," she said, as if time could measure grief. Does not matter how long ago, loss is loss. He pushed back from the table. I will get out to the barn now, let you have your evening. Thank you for the meal, Miss Beatrice. It was the finest I have had in months. After he left, Beatrice sat in the gathering darkness and tried not to think about the warmth in his voice when he said her name, or the way his smile had made her feel visible for the first time in half a year. This was temporary, she reminded herself. He was running from something, passing through, would disappear in 3 weeks like morning frost. Getting attached was foolish. But that night she dreamed of summer green eyes and woke with tears on her face. The next morning she found Mason already at work on her fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He worked with the easy competence of a man who had spent his life building and fixing, who understood the language of wood and nail. Beatrice brought him water mid-morning and found herself lingering, watching his hands. "You are skilled at this," she said. "My father was a carpenter before he took up ranching. Made sure I knew how to build things that last." Mason straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. A man should be able to create, not just destroy. Something in those words caught her attention. "What are you running from, Mason Riley?" His jaw tightened and for a moment she thought he would not answer. Then he set down his hammer and met her gaze directly. "I killed a man in Texas. He was beating a girl half to death outside a saloon in Fort Worth. I pulled him off her and he came at me with a knife. I did not mean to kill him, but I hit him hard and he fell wrong, cracked his skull. Turns out he was the son of a powerful rancher who does not care about the why of it, only wants my neck stretched. So I am heading north to Wyoming territory, where I have a cousin with a horse ranch. Figured I would take the long way, help folks along the route, try to do some good to balance the scales." Beatrice absorbed this, searching his face for deception and finding only weary truth. "You saved that girl. Does not change the fact that a man is dead by my hand. Does not change the fact that you did the right thing." Mason looked at her with something like wonder. "Most people would have sent me packing the moment they heard. I am not most people." Beatrice felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the ice. "And I know what it is like to be judged for circumstances beyond your control." That afternoon, they worked together on the fence, and Mason told her about growing up in Texas, about his mother who died when he was young and his father who drank himself into an early grave. He spoke of cattle drives and stampedes, of nights under stars so thick they looked like spilled milk, of the loneliness that came from never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. "Do you ever get tired of running?" Beatrice asked, holding a post steady while he nailed. "Every day, but running is safer than staying. Staying means letting people in, and letting people in means they can hurt you when they leave." He paused, hammer mid-swing. "Or when they die." Beatrice understood that fear in her bones. "So you just keep moving, never building anything permanent," says the woman hiding in a falling-down shack at the edge of town. The observation was too accurate to be anything but painful. Beatrice dropped her hands from the post. "I am not hiding." "No," Mason's voice was gentle, not accusing. "Then why do you flinch every time you hear horses on the road? Why do you look at me like you are waiting for me to confirm whatever terrible thing you believe about yourself? You do not know me. I know lonely when I see it, I know afraid. I know what it looks like when someone has decided they do not deserve good things." He set down his hammer and turned to face her fully. "I see you, Beatrice Gardner, and I think you're terrified that I do." She wanted to argue, to retreat behind her walls, but the truth of his words pinned her in place. "Why do you care?" "Because you are the first person in months who has looked at me like I am more than a hired hand or a wanted man. Because you fed me without asking questions, trusted me without demanding proof. Because when you smile, which is not near often enough, it is like watching sunrise." Mason reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of wheat-colored hair behind her ear. "And because I think maybe we are running from the same thing." "What is that?" "The belief that we have to do it alone." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. His hand lingered near her face, warm and calloused and impossibly gentle. For one wild moment she wanted to lean into that touch, to let herself believe that someone could see all her broken pieces and not turn away. But fear rose up like a flood, drowning hope before it could take root. "Your 3 weeks will pass quickly," she said, stepping back. "We should not complicate things." Mason's hand fell to his side, but his eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Too late. "Already complicated." That night, Beatrice lay awake listening to the September wind rattle her windows and thinking about Mason Riley sleeping in her barn. She thought about his words, about being seen, about the way her heart had thundered when he touched her hair. This was dangerous, this was foolish. In 2.5 weeks he would leave, and she would be alone again with nothing but a mended fence and a fresh wound to show for it. Better to guard her heart now, better to keep him at a distance. But the next morning she found herself putting on her better dress, the dark blue one with the white collar, and pinning her hair more carefully than she had in months. She told herself it meant nothing, even as she caught Mason's appreciative glance over breakfast and felt heat rise to her cheeks. The days developed a rhythm. Mason worked on her property, moving from fence to roof to the sagging barn door, while Beatrice tended her small garden and prepared meals. They ate together morning and evening, and slowly, despite her best efforts, her walls began to crumble under the steady assault of his presence. He made her laugh, this cowboy with his trail stories and gentle humor. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered. He asked her opinions and remembered her answers. When she mentioned missing music, he produced a harmonica from his saddlebag and played for her in the evenings, sweet melancholy tunes that made her chest ache with longing. A week passed, then 10 days. Beatrice felt herself softening like spring thaw, felt hope creeping back, and despite her best efforts to strangle it. She began to imagine impossible things, Mason staying, the two of them building a life together, waking up each morning to his smile and falling asleep each night to his breathing in the next room. Then reality arrived on horseback, wearing a tin star and asking questions. Beatrice was in the garden when the sheriff rode up, Mason nowhere in sight. Sheriff Dixon was a hard man, weathered and suspicious, who had never hidden his contempt for the widow at the edge of town. "Miss Gardner," he said, not dismounting, "heard you have taken in a drifter, young cowboy, dark hair, working for his keep." Beatrice's heart dropped into her stomach, but she kept her face neutral. "I hired a hand to do repairs before winter. Is that against the law, Sheriff?" "Depends on the hand. Got a telegram from Texas about a wanted man heading this direction. Murderer name of Mason Riley, killed a rancher's son in Fort Worth. There is a reward of $500 for information leading to his capture." $500, enough to pay every debt she owed and have money left over for the winter. Enough to solve every practical problem plaguing her life. All she had to do was confirm that Mason Riley was sleeping in her barn. The old Beatrice, the one who believed survival meant looking out for yourself first, would have spoken up immediately. But something had changed in the past 10 days. She thought about Mason's gentle hands and his honest work. She thought about the girl he had saved, about the fact that he had killed defending someone weaker. She thought about how he saw her, really saw her, when everyone else looked through her like glass. "I would not know about that," she heard herself say. "My hired man is named James Miller from Colorado, has been here a week doing odd jobs." Sheriff Dixon's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" "Quite sure." "Would you like to speak with him yourself?" Beatrice met his gaze steadily, gambling that Mason had heard the horses and had the sense to hide. "I can call him from the barn." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the sheriff spat tobacco juice into the dust. "No need, but you be careful, Miss Gardner. Pretty young widow alone with a drifter, people might talk." "People already talk, Sheriff. I stopped caring months ago." After he rode away, Beatrice found her hands shaking so badly she had to sit down in the dirt. She had just lied to a lawman, made herself an accomplice to a wanted man. If Dixon discovered the truth, she could be arrested herself. She had risked everything, and for what? A cowboy who would leave in less than 2 weeks anyway, but she knew why. Because Mason Riley had given her back something she thought she lost forever, the belief that she was worth protecting. Now she had returned the favor. She found him in the barn an hour later, sitting in the shadows with his rifle across his knees. When he saw her, the relief on his face was almost painful to witness. "I heard," he said quietly. "Thank you for not telling him." "You should leave tonight," Beatrice said, even though the words felt like swallowing broken glass. "If he comes back with more questions, if he searches the property." "I know," Mason stood slowly, setting the rifle aside. "I will pack my things after dark. I am sorry, Beatrice. I never meant to put you in danger. You saved a girl's life, you did nothing wrong. Try telling that to the law." His voice was bitter, "or to the rope waiting for me in Texas." Beatrice crossed the distance between them without planning to, without thinking about propriety or consequences. She took his hands in hers, feeling the calluses and strength, the capacity for both building and violence. Go to your cousin in Wyoming, start over, find the place where you can stop running. I thought maybe I had found it. Mason's voice dropped to barely a whisper. These 10 days with you, Beatrice, have been the closest thing to home I have felt in years. Her heart cracked wide open then, all her careful defenses shattering like ice under spring sun. Do not say things like that when you are leaving. Why not? It is the truth. He raised one hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You are the bravest person I have ever met. You have survived loss and loneliness and the cruelty of small minds, and somehow you still have kindness left inside you. You lied to the law to protect me, risked everything for a man you barely know. Why? Because I see you too, she whispered. Because you make me believe that maybe I am not broken beyond repair. Because when I am with you, I remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just surviving. Beatrice, her name was a prayer on his lips. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting and terrifying. What? Come with me to Wyoming. We can travel as brother and sister, keep to the back trails where no one asks questions. My cousin will give us work, a place to start fresh. We can build something together, something real. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her like she was precious, breakable, worth protecting. I know it is crazy. I know we have only had 10 days, but I also know that I will regret leaving you behind for the rest of my life. Beatrice wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being wanted to throw caution aside and run away with this cowboy, to chase the future he painted with his words. But fear held her frozen, the old beliefs clawing their way up from the deep. She was cursed, she brought bad luck to everyone close to her, love was for fools who could not see reality clearly. I cannot, she whispered. Mason, I am not brave like you think, I am afraid all the time. Afraid that if I let myself love you, I will lose you like I lost Henry. Afraid that your luck will run out because of me. Afraid that I am not enough to make you want to stay when the running gets hard. You think I am not afraid, Mason's voice roughened with emotion. I am terrified, Beatrice. Every day I wake up expecting to find a posse outside, expecting the violence that follows me to hurt someone I care about. But I am more afraid of spending the rest of my life alone, always moving, never connecting. I am more afraid of the man I will become if I keep running instead of fighting for something worth having. I need to think, Beatrice said, pulling away from his touch before she drowned in it. Give me until morning. Mason let her go, but his eyes followed her with such naked longing that she felt it like hands on her skin. Until morning, then. Beatrice did not sleep that night. She sat by her window watching the stars wheel overhead and warring with herself. Every practical consideration said staying was the only sensible choice. She had debts here, obligations. Running away with Mason would confirm every cruel thing the town believed about her. She would be abandoning the life she had built, however meager, for a future built on nothing but hope and desire. But hope and desire were singing in her blood, drowning out reason. She thought about dying slowly in this shack, alone and overlooked, disappearing into the landscape until she was nothing but a ghost. She thought about Mason's hands on her face, the way he saw beauty in her when she felt like a wasteland. She thought about the possibility of children someday, of laughter and music and mornings waking up beside someone who loved her. She thought about the difference between surviving and living. As dawn broke pink and gold across the Montana sky, Beatrice made her choice. She packed her few belongings into a carpet bag, put on her traveling dress, and walked out to the barn where Mason was already saddling his horse. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and she watched hope kindle in his eyes like flame to kindling. I need you to promise me something, Beatrice said. Anything. Promise that when things get hard, when the law gets close or money runs short or I make you angry, you will talk to me instead of running. Promise that we are in this together, not just until it becomes inconvenient. Mason closed the distance between them in 3 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around until she gasped with startled laughter. I promise. God, I promise, we are partners now, Beatrice, in everything. He set her down but kept his arms around her waist, and for the first time in 6 months, Beatrice felt safe. Not because the world was suddenly less dangerous, but because she was not facing it alone anymore. We should go before the town wakes up, she said, before I lose my nerve. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, leaving Copper Creek and its judgments behind. Beatrice did not look back. She kept her eyes forward toward Wyoming and possibility, toward the man riding beside her who made her believe in fresh starts. The journey north took 2 weeks of careful travel on back trails, avoiding towns where sheriffs might ask questions. They posed as siblings, Mason and Beatrice Riley, traveling to family in Wyoming territory. They camped under the stars and talked by firelight, and with each passing day, Beatrice felt herself transforming. Mason taught her to shoot his rifle, patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a tin can at 20 paces. She taught him to cook more than beans and hardtack, to appreciate the subtle art of biscuits that did not double as building materials. They shared stories and silences, fears and dreams, building the foundation of something stronger than either had known before. One night, camped beside a creek with the water singing over stones, Mason finally kissed her. He had been so careful until then, so conscious of propriety despite their circumstances. But something about the moonlight and the privacy of the wilderness lowered his defenses. He reached for her across the fire and she went to him without hesitation. His kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, as if he could not quite believe she was real and choosing him. But when Beatrice made a soft sound of encouragement and tangled her fingers in his hair, something broke loose in both of them. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent and hungry, months of loneliness and longing pouring out in the press of lips and hands. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Mason rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Beatrice Gardner. I think I have loved you since that first day when you decided to trust me despite every reason not to." "I love you too," she whispered, and felt the last of her old fears crumble into dust. "I love you, and I am not afraid anymore." "Liar," he said with affection, tucking her against his chest. "You are still afraid, but you are choosing to love me anyway, and that is braver than not being afraid at all." They reached Wyoming territory on a golden October afternoon, the mountains rising purple and magnificent against an endless sky. Mason's cousin, Daniel Riley, owned a horse ranch in a valley where the grass grew thick and sweet, where wild horses ran in herds across the open land. Daniel was older than Mason by a decade, weathered and quiet, with the same green eyes. He took one look at them together and asked no questions about timing or propriety, just welcomed them both with dinner and a place to sleep in the bunkhouse. "We could use good hands here," Daniel said over supper that first night. "Horses need breaking, fences need mending, always more work than hours in the day. If you are willing to work hard, there is a place for you both." "We are willing," Mason said, his hand finding Beatrice's under the table. "And we plan to marry as soon as possible, make everything proper." Daniel's weather-beaten face creased into a smile. "About time someone made an honest man of you, cousin. There is a preacher in the town of Redemption, about 10 miles east. He will marry you without fuss." They rode to Redemption 2 days later, dressed in their best clothes with wildflowers in Beatrice's hair. The preacher was a kind old man who asked no questions about their past, only made them promise to love and honor each other through whatever trials lay ahead. Beatrice spoke her vows with tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she was being given a second chance at happiness. When Mason slipped a plain gold band onto her finger and kissed her as his wife, she felt like she was being born again into a life she never dared imagine. That night in the small cabin Daniel had given them on the edge of the ranch, Mason carried her across the threshold and set her down gently in the lamplight. "Mrs. Riley," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Beatrice said, reaching for him. "Just by seeing me, by choosing me, by not running when things got complicated. You already do." They came together then with all the tenderness and passion of two people who had fought hard for their happiness and knew how precious it was. Beatrice had feared this intimacy, had thought herself too damaged by grief to find joy in a man's touch again. But Mason was patient and gentle, making sure every moment brought her pleasure, treating her body like something sacred and beloved. When he whispered her name like a prayer and she felt herself shatter into starlight in his arms, she understood that healing was possible, that love could indeed tame even the wildest parts of the frontier. The months that followed were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Mason worked side by side on the ranch, building their skills and their home. He proved to be gifted with horses, able to gentle even the wildest Mustang with patience and understanding. She discovered a talent for keeping books, helping Daniel organize the ranch accounts and contracts. They built furniture for their cabin, planted a garden for spring, spent long evenings planning the future. Mason talked about expanding the horse breeding operation, about building up a reputation for quality animals that would draw buyers from across the territory. Beatrice dreamed of a library of books, of children running through the meadows, of growing old watching sunsets with this man who had saved her from a life of loneliness. Sometimes at night, Mason would wake gasping from nightmares about the man he killed, about sheriffs and ropes and things he could not outrun. Beatrice would hold him until the shaking stopped, reminding him that he had done the right thing, that he was good and worthy of happiness. She understood nightmares, understood the weight of old fears. They carried those shadows together, refusing to let them steal the light they had found. Winter came hard to Wyoming, snow piling high and temperatures dropping brutal. But their cabin was tight and warm, their pantry well-stocked, their bed a haven of shared heat and intimacy. Beatrice had never been happier than those long winter nights, wrapped in quilts with Mason beside her, the wind howling outside but unable to touch them. In March she realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She thought of Henry, of how excited he had been at the prospect of children, of how death had stolen that dream before it could be realized. What if history repeated itself? What if she lost Mason or the baby or both? The old fears rose up, threatening to drown her in their familiar poison. She told Mason one evening by the fire, watching his face carefully for signs of doubt or fear. Instead, he went very still, his eyes filling with something too bright to be anything but tears. "A baby," he whispered, "our baby." "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, needing to hear it. Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. Happy does not begin to cover it, terrified maybe, amazed, grateful beyond words. "Beatrice, you're giving me everything I never knew I wanted, a home, a family. A future." He pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. "I know you're scared, I know what happened with Henry makes this harder, but we are going to be fine, all three of us. I swear it." His certainty became her anchor through the uncertain months that followed. Her body changed, swelling with new life, and Mason was endlessly fascinated by every transformation. He talked to her belly, sang to the baby, built a cradle from sweet-smelling pine that he polished until it gleamed. But in May, the past finally caught up with them. Beatrice was hanging laundry when she saw the riders approaching, three men with hard faces and the unmistakable bearing of bounty hunters. Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the wet sheet and ran for the barn where Mason was working with a young gelding. "Mason, riders coming, armed men, they look like trouble." He was beside her in an instant, moving her behind him protectively. "Get in the cabin, lock the door, do not come out no matter what you hear." "I am not leaving you." "Beatrice, please." His eyes were desperate. "Think of the baby. If these are bounty hunters, if they are here for me, I will not let you get caught in the crossfire. Now go." She went, but only as far as the cabin window, where she could watch the confrontation unfold. Mason walked out to meet the riders, his rifle held casually but ready, every line of his body radiating controlled danger. The lead rider was a grizzled man with a face like saddle leather. "You Mason Riley?" "Who is asking?" "Name's Caleb Jennings, bounty hunter out of Texas. Got a warrant for your arrest on charges of murder. You can come peaceful or we can do this the hard way." "There is a third option," came a voice from behind the bounty hunters. Sheriff Wade from Redemption rode into the yard, flanked by two deputies. He was young for a lawman, maybe 30, with an honest face and a reputation for fairness. "Seems to me there is some question about the circumstances of that killing, Jennings. Got a telegram last week from the judge in Fort Worth. Seems the girl Riley saved finally came forward, told the whole story about the assault. Combined with testimonies from other witnesses about the deceased's violent nature, they are dropping the murder charge." Beatrice felt her knees go weak with relief. Mason stood frozen, not quite daring to believe it. Jennings spat. "That warrant is still good. For about another 10 minutes until the official dismissal arrives. Now you boys rode a long way, and I am sorry your bounty is not going to pay out. But Mason Riley is a respected member of this community, married to a fine woman, got a baby on the way. He has worked hard and kept his nose clean. So you can ride out peaceful or I can arrest you for trespass and threatening behavior. Your choice." The bounty hunters left, grumbling but recognizing when they were beaten. Sheriff Wade dismounted and walked over to Mason, extending his hand. "Sorry for the scare, Riley. Wanted to deliver the news in person. You are a free man. The past is dead and buried." Mason shook his hand, looking dazed. "I do not know how to thank you, Sheriff." "Thank your wife. She rode into town last month asking questions about your case, convinced me to wire the judge in Fort Worth for clarification. If not for her pushing, I might not have followed up." Wade tipped his hat toward the cabin where Beatrice stood in the doorway. "You got yourself a fighter there, Riley. Better hold on to her." After the sheriff left, Mason walked slowly toward Beatrice, his face working through too many emotions to name. She met him halfway and he dropped to his knees in front of her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing his face to her swollen belly. "You saved me," he said, his voice muffled against her dress. "Again. You have been saving me since the moment we met." Beatrice ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling free. "We saved each other. That is what love does, Mason. It makes us brave enough to fight for each other, even when we are scared." Their daughter was born in November during the first snow of the season. The labor was long and difficult, but Mason never left her side, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and telling her over and over that she was strong, she was brave, she could do this. When the baby finally arrived, wailing and perfect, with Mason's dark hair and Beatrice's nose, they both wept openly. "What should we name her?" Mason asked, cradling his daughter with the careful reverence of a man holding his whole world in two hands. "Grace," Beatrice said, "because that is what we have been given. Grace we did not earn and do not deserve, but get to keep anyway." "Grace Riley," Mason tested the name and smiled. "It is perfect, she is perfect, you are perfect." In the years that followed, the horse ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Mason's reputation for training quality horses spread, drawing buyers from across Wyoming and Montana. They added onto their cabin, building extra rooms for the children who followed Grace. Two sons with their father's green eyes and their mother's fierce heart. Beatrice became known throughout Redemption for her kindness and sharp business sense, managing the ranch accounts and serving as midwife to other women in the valley. The overlooked widow had become a pillar of the community, proof that the frontier could be survived and even conquered with enough love and determination. On their 10th anniversary, Mason took Beatrice riding up into the mountains to a meadow where wildflowers grew thick as stars. They spread a blanket and lay together in the sunshine, holding hands and watching clouds drift across the impossible blue sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Taking a chance on the widow at the edge of town." Mason rolled to face her, propping himself on one elbow so he could look down into her face. The years had only made him more handsome, had added character to his features and silver to his temples. "My only regret is that I did not find you sooner. Every day with you has been a gift, Beatrice. You taught me that running does not solve anything, that putting down roots is not weakness but the bravest thing a person can do. You showed me that love is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible." "You showed me the same things," Beatrice said, reaching up to touch his face. "When you knocked on my door that day, I was already dead inside, just going through the motions of surviving. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You were always lovable, the whole town was just too blind to see it." Mason kissed her softly. "Thank God I was not." They rode back to the ranch as sunset painted the sky gold and crimson, their home rising from the valley floor with smoke curling from the chimney and the sound of their children's laughter drifting on the wind. 3 horses grazed in the paddock, a garden flourished behind the house, and curtains Beatrice had sewn herself hung in every window. This was what they had built together, a life, a family, a future carved from the unforgiving frontier through sheer determination and love. They had both believed themselves too broken, too afraid, too cursed by bad luck to deserve happiness, but they had been wrong. Love had not made them weak or vulnerable as they feared. Instead, it had made them stronger, braver, more resilient than either could have been alone. That night, after tucking their children into bed, Mason and Beatrice stood on their porch and watched the stars emerge one by one across the vast Wyoming sky. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, fitting perfectly against him like she always had. "I love you," he murmured against her hair, "today, tomorrow, and every day after. Until the stars burn out and the mountains crumble." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered, "forever." And in that moment, surrounded by everything they had created together, both of them knew with bone-deep certainty that they had found what they had been searching for all along. Not just love, though they had that in abundance. Not just safety or belonging, though they had those too. What they had found was each other, and in finding each other, they had found home. The overlooked widow and the running cowboy had taken a chance on each other when logic said they should not, when fear said it was too dangerous, when the whole world seemed determined to keep them apart. But they had chosen love anyway, and that choice had transformed both their lives forever. They had built a frontier legacy not through conquest or accumulation, but through the simple revolutionary act of seeing each other clearly and refusing to let go. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how they had survived the harsh frontier and built such a prosperous life, Mason and Beatrice would smile at each other across the table, hands still finding each other automatically after decades together. And they would tell the truth that survival was never the point. The point was finding someone worth living for and then doing the hard, brave work of building a life together one day at a time. Their love story became legend in redemption, the tale of the widow and the cowboy who saved each other when everyone else had given up on them both. And long after they were gone, the ranch they built stood as testament to the truth they had learned together. That love, real love, was stronger than fear, more enduring than hardship, and worth fighting for against any odds the wild frontier could throw at it.